So our first question is, what inspired you to join the military?
So I was inspired because I wanted to fly. And I grew up wanting to fly. I grew up in Marin County, just to the north. And my father didn't really have the money, didn't want to spend the money. So I would do different things to kind of find out as much as I could. I was in the Girl Scouts at the time, and they had a really good program over at the Oakland airport. I did that, a couple things. But it wasn't really giving me the license I wanted, which took a lot more money than I had. So my father first told me about the Air Force Academy, which is a school that he said would teach me to fly. Being from Marin County, there wasn't a lot of military knowledge, a lot of military influence. So when I first got there, I was actually not that familiar at all with the military. So it was quite eye-opening at first. But they did teach me to fly, so.
That's really cool.
Can you describe your time in the military, like where you served, how you served?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I went to the United States Air Force Academy for college. And I went there when I was 17. You graduate with a master's in science. Mine was master's in science in international affairs. So at the end, I was deciding whether I would go into kind of an intel, which usually leads to like the CIA or the FBI, or flying, which is why I originally went. But the experiences during the academy, they give you a number of different flying experiences in the summer and different programs. You end up getting to solo and do some things. And so after that, I wasn't sure that's really what I wanted. But I was encouraged by a colonel to go ahead and give that a try to see if that was the career, because you can always switch later on, switch to a non-flying, but you can't start with non-flying and then switch over to fly. So I did go on to Texas first for my first assignment, pilot training. And after Texas, when I graduated, my first assignment was out in Okinawa, Japan. It's a little island to the south of Japan. I was there for 4 years, and I flew DVs around, which are distinguished visitors. I got to fly generals all around Asia, because it is all island-based. So we would either fly them down to the Philippines for meetings, or up to the mainland Japan, or Hong Kong. It was really good. If your goal is to see the world, I mean, I think I achieved that. I think by the end, I've been on all 7 continents, some really good visibility, seeing different parts of the world, which I really enjoyed. After I married my husband while we were in Japan, he's another pilot. And after that, we came back to California, up to Travis Air Force Base. So the way the Air Force works is after you fly a small plane, like flying generals around in a little Learjet, you have to go do what they call a major weapon system. So I chose the C-5, which is a pretty large one. I thought it would be neat. The reason I chose it is the first time we would have to fly back to the States for different trainings and back. And I was trying all the different big planes, and the first time I got on the C-5, I found out they have 2 bedrooms for the crew, which I thought, that is awesome, 2 bunk rooms. And I go, what? This is wonderful. They give you all this rest. It's a kitchen, very roomy, because it's a very large plane. So I went with that one, and again, that was a wonderful experience. We got to fly all over until Desert Storm kind of started, or actually more just until the whole Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, because then the last 15 years, so I was in 25 years, the last 15 years was all one direction, all to the Middle East, all through Asia. It kind of wasn't as fun the end, because you're not seeing quite as many places. Following that, I went out to New Jersey, Fort Dix Warfare Center. The wonderful thing about the military is, like I have short attention span, I like to do different things. They allow you to do all that. They'll let you retrain. So long, I always kept flying, but I was allowed to train into many different things, so that I ended up going to accident investigation school, where you'll go out to be the first one at the accident and try to figure out what went on. They just had one yesterday down in Cuba. They'll have to try to send that same team in and figure out, they have the black box, what exactly went on. I did that when I was at Travis, and then I switched over and they sent me to like flight test school. So we test any new system that's going on the aircraft, and that's what I did out in New Jersey at the Warfare Center. It's a flight test squadron. We get a new program, and you'll test it on all different planes around the Air Force, different ones, whatever it's applicable to. And then you can write up a report and kind of list the flaws and the things. I was a little disappointed in that, because they do buy the stuff, and we would write a report going, this just doesn't do what it's meant to do, this system. You said you wanted it to do all these things. doesn't matter. They go, we already paid for it, so we're doing it. So you kind of felt devalued because, I spent 3 years doing that. I separated after that time. I got out of the active duty Air Force. So I did the first 12 years active duty. Then I decided to go into the reserves. So I wanted to stay with the C5. When I was out there, I had flown the C5s out at Dover in Delaware. It's such a large plane, there's actually only 2 active duty units, Dover or Travis, and then there's some reserve and guard units. So I decided to join the reserve back at Travis. So we came back here. The reserves offered more of an option with a little more control over my schedule. We had young children at the time, and I wanted to kind of have a little more say of when to go and when not. Up to that point, you didn't really get a say. Let's see, so I stayed with them for the next 13 years doing a lot of the flight safety. One of the neatest things was I got to go down to Antarctica and run some flight safety programs out of Christchurch, New Zealand, and then we would fly down, and I kind of ran to make sure all the safety was going down there. They do a winter exchanging people out, some of the scientists in the winter landing on the ice, so that's kind of neat. The same with some of the deployments. So at the end, the Air Force changes. It's, like most things, it changes. And they went to a lot more deployments for the Air Force. They used to not do that quite as often, especially with some of the bigger planes. So I deployed a number of times to different places in Europe, and then also just a couple other places. And then I retired in 2013 after 25 years.
So our next question is, upon exiting the military, what do you think set you apart from people that hadn't followed a service-oriented pathway?
That's a really interesting question. Just this last week, there was a Women's Veterans Summit that I was a panel member on in San Mateo. And it was kind of a similar thing, like what was it like when you first got out? And so I have noticed some differences in the last 3 years. Some of it is kind of that sense of service, like just from so many years of being in the military, when you get to a new place, you kind of had a routine. When you got to a new place, you hit the ground running. You joined things, you saw what you could do to help. It really helps you connect in a new environment with the people, to feel part of a community. We applied that same thing when we got out, and it's been very successful, but it's interesting how many people don't see the benefit in getting involved. So when I first got out, we moved to Half Moon Bay. That's how we ended up in San Mateo County. And I immediately became the PTO of the school. And it was wonderful. I mean, my daughter was a first grader, and I met, 200-300 people right away. And I'm thinking of some people I've met that have been there a couple years and still feel uncomfortable, still don't feel a part of it. And I think it has a lot to do with what you put in. I think the military trains you in that. It's part of what, it just becomes part of your DNA, part of your culture, because you do a lot of service projects. Even when you're there, I know that when I was at one of the trainings for the C5 that I did in Oklahoma, part of what they offered was a chance to go work with Habitat for Humanity there at Altus and continue to work. And most people want to do it because you just have that idea of serving. And they say it's called serving in the military, and I think there's a reason. You are putting others above yourself. It was very uncomfortable at times, but you felt like you were doing it for the good of others. And so I think it just becomes part of who you are.
And then what skills do you think most helped you post-military in life?
Some of it is the leadership skills that I got both at the academy and then further as an officer. It's just that ability to make decisions, to lead others, to kind of work in a group. Others would be that fact of giving, the time and serving others. I think it's a skill because it's something you can build on. It's not, I don't know if it's innate, but it's definitely has helped me feel comfortable, be what I consider successful. And was the question, what are the skills you learned?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be those, because I do think there are benefits also from my time in the military. The whole thing I did afterwards was go back to get my master's, and that was all paid for by the military with the post-GI2 bill. So another benefit of it, but I don't know if that's a skill. So.
And how has military service impacted your career and your commitment to public service or any other aspect of your life?
So it kind of formed who I was. As I said, I started when I was 17, and then really, if you include the academy time, I was in 31 years. So when we were leaving, both my husband and I, kind of the same story. It's a little scary because you were almost leaving a known entity, a known culture, a known environment, and going to a whole new life. And so I think it made us who we are, and then it also formed us, but it all the things we learned, which I think are really good, all the service before self, all the integrity, things that we probably had, but it built us up, those will make you be successful or help you be successful in any career. So I did a career change when I left, and I left kind of the flying world and went into social work. I have my minor is in military social work because I saw a lot of people have trouble reintegrating after deployments, and I wanted some more skills in that area to help them. But I haven't quite, I'm working on the hours to get licensed. So right now I'm working in the school district, and I think those same skills that I learned in the military, it's amazing, but they all transfer and make me very, very good and successful at what I do.
Okay. Our last question is, do you have any advice for young people today in relation to the importance of public service?
A little bit what I mentioned before, I think it's just such a benefit. I think you get so much more out of it. And someone once told me that you don't volunteer for things very long that you don't get things out of. You know, you're not just going to give and give. But I found that in almost anything you are serving, you get a lot more out of it. That's kind of been true even in the most challenging cases. So I would recommend it for people to find something that interests them and then just jump in and give it a try. Most things, if it's not the right fit, you can say, oh, thank you. I'm going to go try something else, and they are just thankful for your time and the effort you put in up to then.